Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come and attend this session on evidence-based practices for writing instruction. My name is Leslie Laud, and I'm a researcher, and I support schools and districts with taking on evidence-based practices. My disclosures are that I receive income from talks, presentations, consulting, federal grants, and royalties from books and courses that I've authored. I'm looking forward to sharing with you an overview of evidence-based practices for writing instruction. I will also share with you examples that are critical for how to bridge research to practice and bring these into your daily instruction and integrate them with whichever core literacy program you're using or materials that you use, and how you can use these in content area writing, such as science and social studies. All right, I am going to write every single day this summer, said no child ever. School has just ended or is about to, and how many of your students hopped onto that last day of school yellow bus and gleefully yelled this? I hear you. Writing is really hard. It's hard to teach and it's hard to do. And when students are stuck, it's really hard to know how to help them. And unfortunately, this is not an uncommon image in many writing classes. Students are frustrated, and so are we. We haven't been adequately prepared to teach writing. I wasn't. I had to find the research, and then I had to do the really hard work of bringing this research into my classroom and figuring out how to use it with my materials and in my context, which is no easy feat. And you're not alone. Across the nation, teachers are struggling with how do I teach writing, and students are struggling with how to write. We didn't receive enough preparation, and the most well-researched practices for teaching writing are not well known or easy to use. Fortunately, there is little debate in the research world. We have hundreds of studies now, and they all show the same findings, which is good news. It's not like one study finds one outcome and another. They're all converging. They're all finding the same outcomes. That there are simple tools and routines that we can use to teach these tools and support students in practicing them week after week over the school year. And when we teach these and support students in applying them, they make writing so much easier for students and so much easier for us to teach. So the focus of the research that I do hasn't been finding out what works, but taking what works in research studies and translating this over to real classrooms to make your lives easier in how do I get started? What do I do first in the teaching of writing and bringing these practices? So we really focus on closing the research to practice gap. So I'm going to share with you an overview of what these most well-supported evidence-based practices are. Some will be familiar and you'll say, great, I already use those. And some may be new, and we'll show you ways that you may not have thought of that you can bring these into your instruction. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the why behind these tools. More good news. We have brand new research that hasn't been published yet. It's in the line to be published, but you're getting it first here. And our field has just taken a huge leap into the future. As you know, curriculum-based measures for reading, like DIBELS, oral reading fluency, or 1-minute fluency, these are power predictors of larger reading outcomes. That's why we give them and use them to track. We have the same work happening in the field of writing, and we have just broken through kind of a glass ceiling, especially in the upper grades, with how to use these most efficiently and how to get the most powerful correlational power so that we know which are the best predictors. And then we can start our instruction there and work on these most heavily if we want to see larger impact in overall writing quality. So to orient you to this chart that you're looking at, again, this is unpublished. It will be out soon. It's research conducted at the lab of Dr. Adria Truckenmiller under IES funding. So the 5 greatest levers that she and her lab have identified are TIDE, which is just text structure. It's topic, information, details, ending, how you would structure a short paragraph. And it's no surprise that text structure is the biggest predictor. We know that that's true in reading instruction as well. Reading and writing are reciprocal, so the same levers are working across both. So tied, starting with at the paragraph level and teaching students how to structure a paragraph is our biggest predictor. That would be our inroad. That is the way to start writing instruction. Then word complexity, that would be vocabulary choice. Word accuracy, spelling is actually a huge predictor of much later writing outcomes. So teach spelling. Typing fluency, Mavis Beacon, typing.com. Make sure that you have time in your schools for students to get fluent at that transcription piece. And then sentence accuracy. That is a significantly much lower predictor, but still periods, capitals, commas, and grammar. We do want to be paying attention to those, and I'll show you some really fun and engaging ways that link to your content that you can work on that. I have left grayed out the one predictor that we weren't sure of, and that is sentence level expansion and variation. And that actually turns out to be an insignificant predictor. The others in bold are much more important, so they would be your inroad. Sentence complexity, we can teach that alongside. We do need to address it, but that's not one of the biggest levers that is going to move overall writing quality. So that's one of the less important features. Teach it, but I would recommend starting off with the bolded. Then moving across this chart, you can see what each of these elements predict. So if your goal is to lift essay quality, you can see that teaching text structure is your best opening bet. Then the M-STEP ELA is overall ELA proficiency. And that is basically your state assessment. So I wanted to show you that chart because now that we have research to guide us in what to focus on, let's look at the bigger picture of how we aim to teach writing and keep those predictors in mind as you look at your writing instruction. So in the field of writing, we know that the goal of helping students to become self-directed and skilled writers should be at the top of our mind when we're teaching writing. And then everything else should be in service of this. The strategies that we give our students, the way in which we're teaching writing should all be in service of building self-directed, skilled writers. So in this first pillar, you see the word power. Power is critical toward supporting students in ultimately becoming independent. We teach them the word power, but we don't just hang it up in an anchor chart. We do that. But then we also want students to write power across the top of their paper every single time that they write, because this becomes a heuristic that they use. They're in charge to guide them when they're writing. And I'll show you some examples of students really doing this. Next, we have a toolkit. And this is where we break down how do we teach each step in power. And the main toolkit ingredients are what to do when we're planning or preparing to write. Then 2 mnemonics that guide students with text structure. Tied works for opinion and informative writing. And we found over the years, to keep it simple, it's better for the kids. They pick up opinion and informational writing much more quickly and easily when they have one mnemonic, and they're just shown how to use that across the different genres. The C space that you see here is the mnemonic that we use for story writing because that is a different structure. The third pillar is my favorite. My background is special education. I'm all about skills. And in this third pillar, we have the goals for what we want to teach at the skill level. So we want to teach sentence composing, sentence accuracy. We want to teach note-taking, how to be organized, getting into variation, how to revise and edit for content and style and mechanics. These are all the what. And finally, we want to teach these in a way that develops self-regulation. So that is the what. I do want to give a quick shout out to foundational skills. Where does that fit in this approach? So in the examples that I'm about to show you, we work off of you having had a handwriting program and a spelling program, and that you're teaching that side by side according to students' needs, either at the opening of class or in warm-ups just before you go into writing in the upper grades, but don't drop those. Handwriting is very important so that students can read what they've written all the way up into high school. You can give a little quick tip. The letters sit on the line, close your circles, but don't give up on handwriting. I know it's hard for a lot of students, but little tips can go a long way, and keep that spelling going through morphology, however you need to do it into the upper grades. So I've added that panel just to show that we do need to be teaching this in parallel with the foundational skills. Okay, so that is the what. Now I'm at the part that I think you're all most interested in, and that is the how. How do we begin? So we recommend that you begin writing instruction by collecting a pre-assessment, and a pre-assessment in the genre you're going to be teaching. So informative, opinion, whatever genre you're teaching at that point. Collect a pre-assessment. You can do a warm pre-assessment where you show a paragraph ahead of time. You may even collaboratively write a paragraph together as a class so that your kids understand what you're asking for when you give the pre. Then you would give a pre-assessment, have your students read a passage and then write a response to it. And then we dive into instruction. And this is day one. One class period, 30 minutes in the younger grades, 45 in the older. And in that first class period, you show your students a response to the pre-assessment. By the way, if you're watching and you're super boots on the ground and you really want to try this out, you're teaching in the summer or you're planning ahead to the fall, we are IES funded, federal grant funded, so we are obligated to post the work that we're creating. So at thinksrsd.com, you can get all of the materials that I'm showing you for free. Okay, so you've given a pre. There are pre's posted at our website, ThinkSRSD. The next day, you do this first lesson. You review what they read. You introduce power, write it on the board. They write it in their notebooks. You introduce tide. You write that, they color code it, and then you show an exemplar. A successful response to the pre-assessment. Your kids will be really interested to read it because they just wrote a pre on the same topic the day before. So they're super curious to see how another student would have responded to the same prompt. Then you color code that, and now you have onboarded the whole framework into your classroom. You're done. One lesson. That is lesson one. You're going to walk out of this webinar with 3 simple lessons that you can try out right away. So that is lesson one. Lesson two, now you take out your materials. So maybe you use CKLA, maybe you use Into Reading. Whatever approach you use, you're taking out your materials, your readings, your books. And you're going to have your students write in response to your texts. And you're going to guide them as they do that. Now you're going to unroll power. And you're going to model how you would walk your students through, or you would model in front of your students actually applying power, and they're writing power at their seat. It works a little differently in kindergarten. We have clipboards and they're using pictures, but we use this K through 12. These practices are research-based and they have been validated K through 12. Okay, so we want students to write together so that they deeply understand the exemplar, how it came to be, and they can see success criteria. How often do we show them this is what we're looking for when we're asking for writing? All right, and before we go to write, we do review older exemplars so that students can review, wait, what were the success criteria we looked at last time? And then we consider those before we create a piece together. It's so fun. You're writing in front of your class. The kids are giving their ideas. My kids really enjoy it. They find it really relaxing. Then after we've written together, we take out a scale and now we teach how to score. Flashback 20 years, I passed out a rubric. I thought I was so smart. I would give my kids the rubric, let them self-score. I did it once or twice. It had no impact. What I've learned is that important piece that I started out with, which is the routine. The importance is to do these practices over and over. We find that after about 10 collaborative writes and 10 modeled scoring, then our students get to the point where they're proficient at producing writing and at self-reflecting. That I hadn't done years ago. Down in the corner, you see our rockets. Again, this is kid-friendly for all different grade levels. If your kids are not ready for a scale, then we have them start off by scoring on rockets. These are 3 lessons. Lesson 1 is one and done. Teach that once, you've onboarded the framework. Lesson 2 and 3, repeat. And that becomes the cycle that you're using all year long. This is a light touch instructional overlay that is incredibly high yield. You can layer it over any program that you have, and we have. We've used it with CKLA, L, Into Reading, Wonders, Open Court. We've used it with all the programs, and we see significant gains in ELA because this is kind of turbocharging how you're teaching your writing. We don't add any time. We're working off of your materials and your lessons. This is a zoom in where I'm going to get a little bit more granular for those of you who are really going to go off and try this. Notice over on the left in the P that there are 3 steps in P. First, we pre-read for a gist. I'm going to go into that later, but that is how we embed sentence instruction. Then we pull apart the prompt. We have little tricks for that. And then we pick ideas. In the youngest grades, we call that a fact list. In the older grades, that would be your evidence notebooks, but we're finding the information from the text. Then in that second panel, you see we then take everything we collected and we organize it into a tied L. Tied L, we have movements that the kids do for all the different parts. In their tied L, they have an L language box where they've been word collectors while they were reading, discussing, catching synonyms, catching words from the text, videos, peers, and they put all those words into a language box. So when they go to write, they've created a whole tied organizer where they've organized everything they originally picked. They created a language box, and then they turned that into an essay. After they're finished with the essay, you know that I'm done. No, you're not. Please grab a scale and please self-score. Then you know the problem that happens in every writing classroom on the planet is kids are finishing at different times. This solves that. This routine is beautiful in that way because other kids are not yet done. Those who are done, go get a scale, self-score, color code, put their goals, put their did wells. Then they find a peer score. And by the time you've got a lot of kids peer scoring, the rest have finished. So you've got the finished writing from all of the students, which is really nice. Again, this is an overlay that fits over your curriculum. It's like gossamer. It's very light touch, very easy to fold in, and very high yield. And I keep coming back to these arrows because it's a cycle. It's a cycle that you do every week. So to wrap up, lesson 1, one and done, introduce the tools. Lesson 2 and 3, repeat. And I encourage you to try this out with your own students. In the younger grades, we just bring down the content. And in kindergarten, we are using picture planning. As you can see in the picture below, we are writing on 2 levels. We call them teacher-led collaboratives or student-led. And that is where the teacher is modeling and the teacher is writing at a high level in front of the students, taking their input. And then we begin to kind of bring the plane down and scaffold students producing their own writing. And that will be at a lower level, but we're teaching at the 2 levels. Again, this is the big view with the goal being that we get to 10 collaborative writes, and then that's when we see the self-regulation really kick in and the kids know what to do. Okay, I'm going to go in, as I promised, and show you how we're doing this in real schools, in real classrooms. One thing that is unique about us is that we have been the only organization to bridge the research to classroom practice gap. And we're incredibly excited about this because this research has been out there for 40 years, but it hasn't been brought at scale to classrooms. And that is what we have been working on for 20 years. And we really have a model now that does this. Very simple model. So you are here. We are lesson 0. You're going to collect a pre-assessment. after you collect the pre-assessment, right after you've collected the pre-assessment, you've had students write about penguins or octopuses, whatever you chose. We do, as I said, have free pre-assessments you're welcome to borrow from at our website. But you've given your pre. Right after the pre, even before lesson 1, you dive into your first instruction by having your students then write a gist statement about what they've just read. So a gist statement is who did what, when, where, and why or what happened. A lot of teachers hang posters in their classrooms so that students can see the different parts of the gist. And then every time that they go to write a gist, they refer to this chart. We actually do gists nearly every day. After every read aloud, a kindergarten teacher told me, anything you see, do, or view. So after a video, kindergartners go to art. You can write a gist statement about that. This is 5th grade, getting a little bit more complex. This is a teacher who was writing about student activists with her students, and she had them put the who was the activist, what did they do, when and where, and why or how or what happened. What do you notice at the top there? You may see the magnets. And that's because we're looking at the long game. We start off the year with this simple phrase, but then we begin to shift the order of the parts of speech. So in 4th or 5th grade, subordinating clauses and even opening with a subordinating clause becomes the standard. You can pull back your why or what happened phrase to the opening, and now you're opening with a subordinating clause. So the gist really becomes front and center for 2 purposes: to introduce and teach all your grammar, spelling, punctuation. And what do you notice about the gist as a second powerful function? What it also does, it serves to teach grammar and practice it daily, but it also develops main idea awareness. So your students get a mental model, reaching back in time to Kinch. They get a mental model and the wonderful work of Nancy Hennessy on reading comprehension. They develop a sense of what the whole text is about. And we get a lot of what we call mini gists, where kids write a main idea statement, but it's only about part of the text. I'm sure you've all seen that. And so what we do is we collect a couple of mini gists and then turn that into a full gist. So everybody's right, everybody gets a prize, all the kids who come up with a gist get credit, and then we work together as a class to come up with the main gist. These are students in action. As I promised you, we would take virtual field trips into classrooms. So we are now in a grade 3 classroom. And as you can see, the students are producing a gist. And if you look closely, you'll see that there are boxes. It is really important that they put the different clauses, parts of speech in different boxes, because just like phonemic awareness, we want students to understand that parts of speech are distinct in a sentence. They don't need to know the terms, but they do need to know that there are chunks in a sentence. And so we separate those out in the gist. Now we're heading downstairs from 3rd grade. We're going down to floor 1, the kindergarten classroom. And this is a kindergarten gist practice. So these strategies work at all the different grade levels. And we're showing you here now how you would do this with imagery for kids who are not yet decoding. Huge shout out to Dr. Charles Haynes at Mass General Hospital for his work around the gist. He's written a book, From Talking to Writing. It's getting a lot of love. I see it on social media a lot, and it was absolutely life-changing for me. I brought it into my classroom and began using it with my students, and there was just no looking back, because I was finally able to address fragments, run-ons, and you can see a picture, a zoom in of students using this. Again, we do it every single day, and it's how we weave in all of the grammar that we need to teach. It's so simple.
Dr. Laud, can I
Yes.
interrupt you for just a second? We have a participant who's asking, is GIST an acronym or is it a main idea? Could you elaborate on that, please?
Great question. Okay, so get the gist is a phrase for getting the main idea of what you've read. So gist and main idea are synonymous. I think Sharon Vaughn uses gist, and Dr. K. Wijakumar, if you don't know that name, Wijekumar, you want to know that name. She is, I think, one of the greatest researchers we have in our field. She calls it main idea. So if you really want to dig in, you can look up the work of Sharon Vaughn. You can look up the work of Dr. Sharon Vaughn and Dr. K. Wijakumar, and you can see, I think they're talking about something pretty close and similar. Love that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please keep asking me questions as they come. Appreciate it. Okay, so now we're going to move on. That was collecting a pre-assessment and then writing a gist about the topic. Then we move in. You are here. We're moving into the first stop in our tour, which is lesson 1. And we're going to go a little bit more deeply into what you do in lesson 1. And I hope that you're taking notes, screenshots, and that you'll really get to use this with students. It's very powerful and it's so fun. So lesson 1, as I said, we introduce power. Just write it on the board, write it on chart paper so that you can then tape it up and leave it hanging as your anchor chart. Always best. People keep asking me, are you going to build anchor charts? I don't, because I think it's best if you write it right in front of your kids. So you'll write power, you'll write out tide, you'll pass out the markers or colored pencils or highlighters. I have seen fierce debates break out about whether colored pencils or highlighters are better for this activity. I am not even going to wade into that one, and it is your choice. Use the mode that you like, but have those ready. Have your kids color code the word tide and the different parts it stands for, and then color code a strong response to the pre. That itself often doubles the production that we see from kids, because instantly the light bulbs go off. Oh, that is what you wanted me to do. Okay, so that is lesson 1. And I'm going to show you step by step. I love this chart. This is just teacher friendly. You can just make this chart with your kids watching, 2nd grade and above, 3rd grade and above maybe. They're writing it in their notebooks as you're producing it. And then you're done. After school, you have time for lesson planning. You have time to respond to parent emails. You don't need to go down to the art room and make something elaborate. It can be this simple, produced right in front of the kids. Younger grades, we call it POW. And we bring down the terminology in tide. Then we pass out the exemplar. And we put a magnifying glass over it and we dive in. We dive into these over and over every week through the whole year. Where do you get a year's worth of exemplars? Your kids will be giving them to you. You will assign writing, you'll be supporting your students in producing it. In the end, you'll have exemplars. So here's the exemplar. We dive in, hearken back to Dr. Adria Truckenmiller. This is really important. Step 1, day 1, is to teach text structure. I know that there are a lot of mnemonics out there. I didn't come up with tide, Dr. Linda Mason did, but I like it the best because it names the features of the paragraph. Those of you who teach students with developmental language disorders, you're with me. You know that every single word counts, every word matters. So we want to keep the language as simple as humanly possible and not layer on other names and acronyms for a paragraph. Just call the paragraph what it is. So we have tide. We color code the paragraph according to the parts of tide. That would be lesson 1. In the future weeks, you can dive back in to analyze the topic sentence, to look at transitions, to look at opening clauses that are subordinating clauses, to look at the linking words, to look at conjunctions. You can dive back in and look for all different layers of writing. But day 1, keep it simple. You have the whole year to keep diving in every week to your exemplars. All right, as promised, field trip back into the schools. This is upstairs in the middle school wing. These are kids working together. You know how they love to work together. We can make writing so social. Here are kindergartners coming up and holding the marker and taking their turn to underline the different parts in a paragraph according to the colors. They really love that physical engagement. But this is something really important that I hear from kindergarten teachers over and over. They all say, but I want to start at a sentence. They can't produce a sentence. Good. Do gist work for a week or two, but get them onto the paragraph as soon as you can. The 5-year-old mind works in a burst. And all of you who teach the young grades know this. They come bursting into the classroom with their mental bursts. I saw a spider. It was fuzzy. It was big. They don't talk in one sentence. They don't think in one sentence. That's not how their brain works. They think in a group. Dr. Young-Soo Kim has done really nice research on bursts, and they are connected ideas. So we just want to show our kids how to connect their ideas. The sooner, the better. Show and tell time has never been better since we taught this, because now the kids come up and talk about their pine cone, but they're using Tide to guide them as they do. I teach students with severe disabilities, and I was teaching a girl, the spider came up because she would come in and tell me things that happened at home and I could not understand her. And after we taught her Tide, she would come in and be bursting and I would say, use Tide. And I'd see her think, and then she would tell me, I saw a spider. It was brown. I felt scared. And she would organize her thoughts that within a month, I could understand this child. So I can't say enough about how much this supports early oral language and what it does for the upper grades. That was lesson 1. If you're taking notes, lesson 1, you introduce the tools, you basically teach. Lesson number 2, you model. If you want a shortcut for remembering lesson 1, 2, 3, it's teach, model, reflect. So we're now on lesson 2. We just taught, now we're going to model. And now it's time to write collaboratively. You are here. You are in the part that is my students' favorite part. We at Think SRSD all argue over what our favorite parts are. For me, I think mine is self-talk, but the kids, the definite winner is collaborative writes. So here is a teacher leading a collaborative write. Not only do you get to see into a classroom, you're actually going to get to sit and watch about a minute or two of an actual lesson where a teacher is modeling using Power and Tide in front of her students. She's doing a think aloud, and she would also be engaging them and having them participate.
Okay, boys and girls, so what we're going to do right now is I am going to model a think aloud for you. And the purpose of me doing this is that you can see what I'm thinking in my head. Because normally thoughts, you can't see thoughts. You don't know what somebody else is thinking, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think out loud everything that I normally think in my head as I write. And I want you to be really good listeners and to listen for things that I'm saying to myself to encourage myself, things that I say when I'm starting to get tired or distracted, and the kinds of things that I say to myself as I'm writing. So I'm going to pretend like I'm a student. Andrew, what should my name be?
Sammy or Katie.
Katie? Okay, I'll be Katie. And Katie doesn't really like writing. She thinks writing is kind of hard, but her teacher has given her some strategies to use that make writing a little bit easier, okay? Okay, so, it's time to write. I really just don't like writing, but okay, I can do this. My teacher has given me a strategy for writing, and that's Pow and Tide. So I'm gonna write that at the top of my paper. Okay. All right, I can do this. I'm just going to start with the first thing, which is P. P stands for pull apart the prompt. Pulling apart the prompt, oh, I know, my teacher always makes me go, do what? Whenever I have to pull apart the prompt. So I'm going to do that at the other side of my paper. Do what? Okay. So the prompt says, gosh, I'm just really tired right now. I don't know. Okay, it's okay. I can do this. I'm just going to take it one step at a time. The prompt says, describe how octopuses protect themselves. So the do is always the verb. So that would be describe. Okay, so the prompt wants me to describe. Describe what? Describe how octopuses protect themselves. So I'm just going to say octo protect. Okay. All right, good. So that's the first part of P. Woo! I just did the first part of P. I'm so good. Okay, now I'm going to pick my ideas. So I have to make my circle map to pick my ideas. So I'm going to say octo protect. Ha, that's a nice circle. Okay. One way that octopuses protect themselves is they squirt black ink. Okay. I wonder what's for lunch today. Oh, I should ask. No, I'm not going to ask my teacher. Right now I need to stay focused. Okay. I'm done with my P. Now I'm ready to go on to my O.
Okay, so I wanted to show that so that you could see what modeling really looks like in a real classroom. As you saw, she was not just modeling the writing process, she was modeling self-regulation. You may have noticed that she was saying, oh, what do I do now? Oh, this is hard. She's being relatable and she's showing kids how to cope when those very real feelings come up. And she was modeling how to use this toolkit. So the self-talk is a very important part of the toolkit. This is a kindergarten classroom. You can model this all year long. And when you go through color coding, definitely have students participate. Here's a first grade teacher modeling in a POW cape. She's got POW written on the back there. And then she's moving toward independence by teaching in small groups. So after you model a couple of times, the kids become increasingly independent, and then you move them into small groups. And I just love this picture so much. You can see the fun POW capes that she picked up at the dollar store. And some of the kids are continuing to work with her, but some have said, no, I've got this. I can go do it. And they're self-differentiating. I love this picture too. This is from a Title I school, and this just blew me away. There were about 4 or 5 kids who could transcribe. This is kindergarten. And so the teacher put them into groups with 1 transcriber per group in the spring. And the kids were all giving their ideas, and that 1 transcriber was like, wait, I have to write these down. And the other kids were eagerly giving their opinions and their advice. And this just took hold. The kindergarten teachers were blown away. I hear that over and over from every grade, that the teachers never realized how high the kids could go and what they could produce. Here's an example from kindergarten of a teacher-led write. Here's some kindergarten writing. Tide planners, you get double or triple the writing from your kids. And then back up to middle school. As I look at this, what's striking me is that language is trapped inside our kids with their ideas. And they often don't know how to get their idea out, and that can be frustrating. And what this process does is it helps them organize so they can be understood, and it helps them find their words and build their academic language, so that the language isn't trapped inside, and what's in their heart, they can communicate and communicate it compellingly. And that's just so empowering and liberating to our students to teach in this structured way. All right, as needed, we give sentence stems. In addition to the gist sentence level work, we give stems that students internalize. And we give older grade stems so that students can, these don't replace the hard work of deep thinking, they facilitate it. One of the first times I used this, I had a 5th grader kind of pulling on my sleeve saying, I don't know what to do for my detailed analysis. And I said, well, why don't you look at this handout? And he took it and walked off and wrote beautiful analysis that was completely original, but these served as like training wheels to help him get going. There are all kinds of songs. If you go to Think SRSD on YouTube, you'll see a large collection of songs. The kids love to sing about POW. This is a kindergarten teacher singing with her class about POW.
We've made up our own song to help us remember what tide means, and it's a strategy to help us write. Boys and girls, let's sing. Ready? In kindergarten we write facts and we call it tide. T-I-D-E, tide.
So I just wanted to show you that we have these. Why is it critical for our kids to memorize power and tide? Why do we want them? Every minute we teach is pure gold and precious. Why would we spend time singing this? Yes, it's fun, it's engaging, you've got the whole body involved, they're doing movements, but why? If we want them to use it independently, they need to be able to call it up independently. They need to be able to remember it. This is another picture that I absolutely love. It's a first grade class in Worcester, Massachusetts, and they noticed that their street sign did not have a heart. And most street signs in Worcester do have a heart. So they wrote to City Hall and they used Tide to structure their essays. And City Hall called them in to read their beautiful essays and then delivered a street sign. And I think when kids can see that their communication can impact the world, they're much more bought in. By the way, a quick note on this district, they use this K6, it spread to the other K6 schools. The middle schools want to know, hey, what's going on? Why am I seeing the best writing I've ever seen coming up? High school took it on and they ended up graduating more seniors after 12 years of this than ever before who were first generation accepted to Ivy Leagues like Yale and Dartmouth. They saw the greatest increase and it was after 12 years of this approach. All right, moving along through, as I promised you, you would get 3 lessons. The shortcut way to remember the lessons is 1, teach, 2, model, and 3, reflect. And so we're now on lesson 3. And this is where you model how to score and set goals. And this is so heavily researched. It's been found effective in approaches that are a framework, and even independent studies that have just looked at goal setting have found tremendous outcomes. So goal setting is one of the biggest parts of this approach. It's also one of the hardest. So pay close attention to this and be sure that you get to goal setting in your class. As shared, lesson 1, one and done. Lesson 2 and 3, repeat. Lesson 2 is the collaborative modeling and practice. Lesson 3 is scoring and goal setting. When you engage in scoring and goal setting, you enable your students to internalize the features of effective writing. And you start where your kids are at. I started with rockets in grade 5, if that's what my kids needed. Then you move to a scale. By upper elementary and middle, we give full guidelines for what to do. My kids, I laugh because they're like, this is the answer key. And I'm just like, yeah, you know, don't let that get out. But they look over this key and then they look back at their writing and they're like, oh, I need to fix this part and this part. And they jump in and they start fixing their writing. It's so important that they internalize the features of effective writing. The modeling teaches the processes, but that doesn't enable them to produce effective writing. It's the scoring where they see and learn and internalize the effective writings, the effective features. I love this because it's regular progress monitoring. And every week I get to watch my kids growing at all different levels. So this is a very powerful evidence-based practice to have students self and peer score. But for me personally, I have to give you a life hack. It cut my scoring time by hours, and I could collect more writing and not feel guilty that I wasn't scoring at all because they were self and peer scoring. I'd call them back to the lima bean or kidney bean, whatever we call that table. I would have them share. I would be glancing at their writing, glancing at their scores, letting them know where I disagree. And they would get this incredible instant feedback. The other thing I would do is score in front of my class 1 essay. But as the kids were watching, they were putting notes on their own essays. So whereas it used to take me a full week to confer with my whole class, I can now confer with my whole class in an hour. And everybody is getting individualized feedback because of this system that I've set up. So how does this work? How do we get started with scoring? We start by giving our kids the pre-assessment that I talked about earlier. That is their first piece of writing, and that becomes really nice because that becomes the metric from which they measure their growth over the year. They take the pre. Many of you have given a pre. Why would you give a pre? Why would we collect a pre? We want to collect a baseline. We want to show growth, but there's a bigger reason. The reason why we want to collect a pre, most importantly, is so students can set their own goals. This is a paradigmatic shift. It's not about me doing to students. It's about putting students in charge of their own lives. It's getting it off the teacher and on the students, as Amy Thomas often says, a wonderful expert at Think SR State. So we want the kids to set their own goals, and their pre is going to launch that. Oh, here's where I could be stronger. I'm going to work toward that. Then they compare back to their pre and see their growth and feel really good that they're getting better and better. This is what gets them out of learned helpless and into a growth mindset. We do this all the way up to high school. We do it all the way down to the youngest grades. So here are some students who are scoring their own writing. And there's a wonderful teacher, Michelle Rahalowicz in Colorado, who has her students, she's teaching her students all the important components of writing, and this is from her classroom. So if they don't know what a topic sentence is, she's teaching that while she's scoring with them. Takes her 30 minutes. She does it about once a week. She sees 4 kids together and then sends them off and pulls back another group. And she's able to check in with all of her students in this way. Here are some other young kids self-reflecting. And this picture I love so much because it's kids peer scoring. And they filled in their own rocket. They've got their essay. They're reading it to each other. And what do you not see in this picture? There's no teacher. The kids are all sharing with each other. Oh, and that rocket. I love this teacher had a rocket and the kids put their did well and their goal at the bottom of their rocket. The self-talk is so important. We really drive it home when we're scoring, but we are using self-talk every single day. Before we write, while we write, when we're scoring, I start off every class period with self-talk. When I first learned this approach, I loved the self-talk, but I would forget it and I wouldn't build it in, and I would confide to my colleague, Pooja Patel, I don't think I'm doing enough with the self-regulation. And then I realized I could just start every single writing class with self-talk. The self-talk helps the kids set their goals and push themselves to meet it. And it becomes the central force in this approach. You didn't know that you were going to get homework in a patent webinar, but you are. Your homework tonight is to only use positive self-talk. No beating yourself up about anything. You will see a change in your biochemistry. Our brains literally light up differently when we are speaking positively to ourselves. And a quick note on a more serious level, we have a lot of kids who've been through a lot of trauma, particularly in the past few years, and their brains are reflecting it. We can't always be there and we don't go on with them through life, but something we can give them that is permanent, that will help them heal from trauma and inoculate them from the full effects of trauma, is how they talk to themselves. I've been through something rough before, I can get through this. The way they're talking to themselves is actually forming their brains, not just how it lights up in the moment, but it's building out areas of their brain. And so this self-talk work is so incredibly important. I am convinced it's the most important part of this. It's why I argue that this is the best part of these approaches. So how do we teach self-talk? You can get really explicit and have kids list things they say to themselves that are not helpful and what they could try instead. This is a video I use with my children all the time, and it becomes a meme in our class. And the kids will say to me, I'm ready to jump in the pool, just like the boy, Ms. Laud. So I'll let you hear from this. It's about 20 seconds.
Okay, I'll do it if I Wait a second! I'm brave! I'm strong! God made me strong! I'm gonna jump in this water right now, jump the pool! Okay, I'll do it right now.
It's It's a very sweet video, and the message is absolutely profound. He was nervous, afraid, confidence was wavering, but he took control and he talked himself into going ahead and doing it. That's not natural to children. He was taught that. Some caretaker, parent, somebody somewhere taught him how to do that. And now he's pulling it up and using it. A little bit of research from John Hattie. Self-efficacy, a belief that one can succeed, is the greatest influence on achievement. So having students reflect on their writing growth, reflect on the statements they're saying to themselves so we can get into their brains and actually recraft how they're talking to themselves when they write is critical. These are self-regulation menus from the youngest grades. So I built this with a K1 team. We built up a whole menu and the kids would circle 2 self-regulation strategies that they were going to use that day. So to wrap up, this is the power cycle. 3 things: teach, model, reflect. That's it. 3 lessons. Go do these with your students tomorrow. Teach by introducing the tools and strategies and showing an exemplar. Model, as you saw in the video, the collaborative practice, bringing in more and more high levels of writing and modeling new strategies each week, and then reflect so that you can set your goals. If you're going to try this out, please write goals in all caps and put stars around it. That is the most important motivator in this approach, and that is the part that teachers forget. So definitely please pay attention to getting to the goal setting. All right, you just took a tour of the different parts of the power cycle. We visited a few schools. And to recap, this is the power cycle. As you can see, these are the different parts. Each week, you'll have your students go through this. You can think of it as we teach the what, then we show the how, and then we support students in where am I. Here's a zoom in again at the younger grades. This is the full power cycle. And now in the wild, this is an actual classroom. And I want to share something with you that I shared with a literacy leader in New Jersey recently. She called me up and she's in year 2 and she was so excited because they had expanded and they had 20 new classes trying this. And she said, it's all happening. They took the New Jersey State assessment and the teachers were out in the hall like screaming. They're all making Tide planners. They're all using positive self-talk. Again, we see this every year. Everybody has to be quiet for the entire day because the kids don't finish. They just write and write and write. I remember one school, they had used it in 6th grade, not the in the upper, were like, really? It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and they're not done in 6th grade? They ended up scoring the highest scores for the whole state of Rhode Island and Massachusetts for their SES level. There's like a magic pixie dust that happens when the kids become self-regulating, when you stay with this approach. And I'm 18 years in and I relive that magic pixie dust every single late winter into the spring when we see the kids take off. And think about what writing does for the brain. When we read, we consume, but when we write, we create. There's a great phrase, reading is access and writing is power. And if you just think about how the brain lights up, this is incredibly important to focus on writing and to get the kids to the skill levels and to be equipped with strategies so that they can reach independence. How do you do this all year long in your curriculum? Younger grades, you're going to do short writes, little paragraphs all year long from the beginning of the year. Upper grades, you're going to do a mix of a lot of quick writes, exit tickets, short writes with a couple of longer essays folded in, 2 or 3, sometimes 4, usually about 3 or 4. So this is K2, short writes every week all year. 3 and up, we mix shorter writes with fuller essays. We integrate with any and every curriculum easily, light touch. As I said earlier, this is the work that we do with schools, mapping out how you're going to bring this into your curriculum. So quick nod to high quality instructional materials. Many of you use them. That is incredibly important to have some kind of curriculum You have to have complex text or this will not work. You won't see the growth. You need students to be attacking complex text, learning from it, picking up the syntactic patterns, picking up the vocabulary, and then in a structured way, carrying them over and using them when you write. So the way that we roll this in is we simply show the overlap and roll in power and tide practice throughout the week. It's been very easy to do. So this is the power cycle, 3 steps. Step 1, 1 and done, 2 and 3, repeat. Do it 10 times to get to self-regulation, and you'll see that magic pixie dust. Here's a teacher who was nervous to try this out, and you're going to hear in about 1 minute what her experience was with teaching some of the most learning disabled students that I know of. And she brought this into her classroom, students with DLD, autism, all kinds of difficulties. And here she's speaking about her experience.
I primarily work with students who struggle with writing. And so I asked them at the beginning of learning POW and TIDE how they felt about writing, and almost all of them said that they didn't like it. It was too hard. They didn't know what to write. And just the other day, I asked them if their feelings towards writing have changed. And every single one of them said, yes, we love to write now. They come in at the beginning of every class and they ask if they are going to get to write today. So I asked them what changed. And they said using the POW TIDE strategy just makes it so easy for them. They know exactly what to do. They know exactly what's expected of them. So I have turned these students who were afraid of writing and nervous to write into students that want to write every single day.
But note, that was about 10 years ago. She still uses this all the time today and helps us with professional developments. Historically, writing has been hard. It's still hard today. We can move into a future where we pick up these simple shifts, use these strategies, and go from 24% proficient to 100% proficient. There's no reason why with these strategies, all of our students can't be writing. So I hope that you'll pick up and try out these strategies, teach, model, reflect, 3 simple things, bring them into your classroom. ThinkSRSD.com has free materials that can support you, posted at our website. And I think we'll move into Q&A now.